No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Jillian, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of the EOS Dublin podcast called Ignition with me, Jillian. And today I have a friend of EOS on the line, Mick O'Sullivan, who is the CEO and founder of BlockVHL platform. Good morning, Mick, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Jillian.
So, Mick, I have heard you speak quite a few times recently, actually, and I was struck. You have a background in finance, and I was struck that you mentioned that we're still reporting like the Dow Jones, as we did like back in the 50s. So do you think there is something fundamentally wrong with our modern, traditional financial systems?
I do, very much so. And it was a very simple thing that brought it home to me. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back in the end. There was a hurricane in the US and I was watching CNBC and I flicked over to CNN and one station was showing the hurricane and the other station was showing the Dow Jones, the usual thing. And the Dow Jones people were saying, didn't we give them plenty notice? Why didn't they get out? We told them the hurricane was coming. The forecast was there. And some brave soul from the back chimed up. Well, a lot of these people couldn't leave because they couldn't go to a hotel or wouldn't have the savings that would support a one-night stay in a hotel. And that really brought it home to me that on one station, they were measuring how much bigger the balloon was getting, as it were. But they weren't measuring at all who was owning the balloon. Mm-hmm. The size of wealth is one measure, but its distribution is an equally important measure. And I just think the world is totally concentrated on building up wealth for fewer and fewer people. And that's what the Dow Jones does. It is a measure of the amount of wealth, but even though that is going up, it is being held in fewer and fewer hands. So what I'd like to see is a measure of the size of wealth, but also its distribution. And as I said before, it actually was good back in the 1980s to see that maybe 3M or General Electric had gone up by 0.6% and the impact that had on the S&P 500. But that's only one measure. That's a measure of the amount of wealth that we might be creating, but totally ignores the fact that with every single crisis, the outcome of every crisis is that wealth gets concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And that's ultimately what I think digital currencies are going to do. They're going to bypass old systems that were built for a different age. And I think that they're going to be much more concentrated on ensuring that whatever income we do generate gets attributed to the people who are generating it rather than to the middlemen who are in between.
Well, actually, you just answered my second question. I was going to say, from that traditional finance background, and you're right, sometimes we have to unthink how we've thought before, because am I right in saying that GDP is a relatively new way of measuring economies, and it doesn't take into account at all, as you said, the distribution of wealth and how ordinary people are experiencing their life, that their wealth, or lack of it more likely, is not measured at all. Is this sort of gross?
Absolutely. But the other thing that has been brought home to us very much with the most recent European elections is it doesn't measure climate change or how much resources are being used in order to generate that wealth. It just looks at the output, an output without reference to input or without reference to how it is spent. This distribution effect of it, I think, is a very naked measure. It's only telling you part of the story. So I'd be looking at, I suppose, the size of the wealth. I'd be looking at how evenly it is spread. I'd be looking at how easily it is attributable to the people that actually generate it and not to freeloaders who are able to get in between the producer and the end consumer. And finally, I think it's absolutely vital that we take account of the amount of resources that are being used to generate it and whether it's worth it. Are we just sacrificing future wealth in order to enjoy consuming that output right now? So,
I think there's, the whole idea, if you go back to maybe like the American dream, maybe our developed world dream, that if you work hard, you can achieve things. And that's sort of, well, it wasn't a myth. It was a reality. If you really worked hard and you had education of some sort, it didn't have to be formal, but if you worked hard, you could do better than your parents. That would be the aspiration, that the parents would do better. And for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, our children are not necessarily going to do better than us through hard work and education alone, because it's like it's been a stopper put on the whole world. And we don't realize it. And as you said, only 1% of the world owns like 83% of the wealth. And guess what? That 1% is not going to let go without good cause. And I can't see it happening. So I totally appreciate, because I'm coming from the same standpoint, your disillusionment with the financial world and its distribution and its measurements. So when you first discovered digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, did you instantly see the value?
I didn't, not at all. And I think if truth were told, most of us don't, and most of us struggle, and a very high proportion of us struggle, even after it has been so-called explained to us. I think it's a hard concept to get. And more as I grow older, I realize that acquiring new learning isn't the difficult thing. It's losing the old learning that is the hard thing.
Well done. That you've actually put the nail on the whatever. What's the expression? I can't even think of the expression. That's spot on.
Yeah, and
we have all these old notions, and it's very hard to get rid of them.
Yeah, and like if, say, somebody from the digital world who had never experienced the money world, if, say, you were trying to explain to them what the concept of, you'd pay for something and then the shopkeeper would hand you back change. What do you mean, change? They'd hand you, what's change?
Yeah.
Why would you have change? And the digital world, obviously, there isn't any such thing as change, but it's even a very, very simple concept that actually old money, you do need change. And if, say, you get on the bus and you don't have the exact change, you might only have a €5 note, well, then he'll take the €5 note and your trip costs you the €5. So there's an awful lot of learning, I think, that we've got to leave behind us. And it's very, very hard to differentiate that old learning that befitted a way of doing things 100 or 300 years ago and doesn't really fit into the way of things today. I'm really impressed by the way younger people will tell you, I've a Revolut account, and they've no idea of what blockchain is or Bitcoin. And I think that's a fantastic step forward. And I think that's what we who are advocates of Bitcoin and blockchain have got to get over, that we've got to sell people the concept that we have without explaining the tech behind it. The tech behind it isn't relevant at all. We've got to make that experience seamless.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's no more than understanding the HTML behind the internet. It doesn't matter. Who cares? We just use it. Interesting enough, we were at a common meeting last week during blockchain R&D, and somebody asked a question. I was quite surprised because it was a very sophisticated group. Is our digital currencies a Ponzi scheme? I looked over this person and I said, quantitative easing. And she said, is digital currency a Ponzi scheme? I actually quite realized that I'm looking at her going, what is quantitative easing then when you're at home? That's surely counterfeiting at its most basic form. And there was no comprehension. That question was asked several times. I was quite surprised. But you are 100% right. We have to unlearn I use the term unthinking, which is true, but actually it's more important. It's not even unthinking. It's unlearning those things that we've learned, those ways of doing business, which no longer serve the planet or humanity well anymore. So when you first came across cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, you also came across the whole crowdfunding. So how did you find that?
I suppose the first impression that I had with it, I'd a nephew who was looking to fund an outfit himself. He was only 17 and he was looking to fund his own outfit. And he was going online and he was finding, I suppose, non-blockchain related ways of doing crowdfunding. And almost at the same time, I was coming across initial coin offerings.
Mm-hmm.
And they just seemed to be catching the public, the imagination of the public. And the one thing that endeared me to them was that you could circumvent the VC industry. I think the VC industry, whereas it has done quite a good job, it only serves a very small proportion of people who are looking to start up their own business or who have a new idea and who are looking to put it to use. I think crowdfunding you could see the instant success. You could see that it was capturing people who had ideas within blockchain. I began following some of the major listing websites, and it quickly dawned on me that it was almost like stockbroking in years gone by. You could ring one firm of stockbrokers and they'd tell you that one company was very good and invest in that. And you could ring a competing one and they'd tell you a completely different company. That every intermediary had their own favorite. So I noticed that there was a gap in the market, that there was nobody who was amalgamating all of the ideas from all of the listing websites that were out there. And once I began documenting and listing it, I suppose I found that the crowdfunding element of blockchain was much, much bigger than anybody was giving it credit for. And that's essentially how the blockchain vehicle business came to pass. It was just, I suppose, tracking different listing websites and comparing them to other funding mechanisms that were out there. And it quickly dawned on me that crowdfunding had just stolen a march on everybody else. And I've now come to see that big gap that opened up between the amount of funding that was sourced via crowdfunding and VC is equivalent to what economists might call an output gap. That it was somebody trying to engineer a new product, but not being given the opportunity to do so. And that really excited me, that you could highlight the output gap, possibly help people understand why it was happening. And once you gave people a free canvas and said, look, guys, you don't have to go through any intermediary at all. This blockchain innovation can be applied to art. It can be applied to health. It can be applied to food provenance. It can be applied to supply chain. It can be applied to green energy. All of a sudden, the money became flooding in. And I suppose that's how I got involved. And it's that whole myriad of use cases that blockchain technology can be applied to that really keeps me going in this.
In your platform, the blockchain block vehicle, you collated information and data from some 10,000 crowdfunding ICOs across the board. Can you highlight some of the main trends that you witnessed?
The trend that really concerns me is one, I suppose, coming from financial markets and economics and being a consultant for a while, what really concerns me is how Ireland is doing in all of this. So yes, I track 10,000 entities in the blockchain database. I split them by activity group and I split them by country. And whereas Ireland is doing a lot, I really feel that an awful lot more needs to be done. The way that I judge it, rather than being in the top 10 or the top 20 or the top 30, I think on certain measures, we're getting into the top 75, and that's about it. And I think we have an awful lot more to offer, simply because there are so many of the major companies in the world, the Googles, blockchains, Twitter, LinkedIn, with them all located in a very, very small area of Dublin. We have fantastic innovation here with fantastic youths. The universities are so willing to collaborate, but somehow or other, I don't think that we're stitching it together well. So, rather than picking out single companies and saying, I like company A, company B, company C, I tend to take a slightly different approach and say, I'd like to come at this from the point of view of what can be done for the country itself. Mm-hmm. And to maybe answer your question a little bit more directly, I also have got to see what's really happening on the live scene, what's happening in Dublin that is helpful. And there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever in my mind that what EOS are trying to do, that singles them out as one of the blockchain companies in the world that need watching. These are the guys that are monitoring. These are the guys that have the capability, and these are the guys I think that are going to be pushing the frontiers of innovation. And to that extent, I think EOS Dublin do a great job. They don't confound you in technical detail. They don't try to explain the mechanics of what is going on. It's all very easy. It's all very, you accumulate the knowledge by a process of osmosis. It just seeps in slowly. And I think that's an approach that is really suitable to blockchain. And I'd commend the guys very much for that. They don't overburden you. They give you the resources that are there. They're very inviting for people who want to come on their EOS platform. And I think it's just something that, it is a great facility. It's a great resource. And even going back to my own blockchain database, what I wanted to do was set up a resource that people could use, as it were, that they could tap into, and that you can leave some sort of a legacy. And there's an equivalence or a resonance, I think, between EOS and what I'm trying to do. So,
wow, that's a wonderful recommendation for EOS Dublin. Thank you very much for that. So just to finish up, tell people where they can find you, Mick, and find your data and find all your research.
Blockchain Vihil, which is, it doesn't come across that well, but www.blockchainvheel.com. I try to publish reports reasonably regularly. I've taken a month off because I'm in the middle of moving house, but I've done a report on each of 45 activity sectors. Next month, I'll be doing a report on countries and what various countries are doing in terms of blockchain. And I'll be expanding it shortly thereafter and looking at ways that possibly people can value blockchain apps and blockchain product that is coming to market. And that's about it,
There's a lot of content there. And your email, what's your email? So if people want to reach you as well, reach out, or what's the best way?
I think the easiest email is mickosull@gmail.com, MICKOSULL@gmail.com. That's the one that I see first of all, and probably the one that I'm using the most at present.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time again, Mick. I can recommend anyone goes over to your website, the Blockchain Video. There's a lot of content there, or reach out to you directly. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Thanks ever so much, Jillian.